This like raspberry lip is kind of serving. Hello loves, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the history drag queen, and today we are talking about the Trojan War. Well, we'll mostly be discussing the mythological history of it because as historians, we really don't know if that even happened or was a thing. Now, we do know the city of Troy did exist, but the Trojan War is actually a poem that survived from Homer's Iliad. And if you watched my Collapse the Bronze Age video, I actually mentioned the city of Troy because it may or may not have been destroyed by the Sea Peoples, and that was the inspiration for the literature of the Trojan War, maybe. But anyway, I digress. Now, we do know that the city of Troy existed from archaeological finds in modern-day Turkey, but the evidence that there was a 10-year siege on that city does not exist. But let's talk about the mythological history of the Trojan War. And some of you are probably wondering, Miss Wendy, what is the Trojan War? The Trojan War was actually an epic tale of conflict between the early Greeks and people of Troy in Western Anatolia during the Bronze Age. According to classical and literary sources, the beginning of the Trojan War was actually the kidnapping or the elopement of Helen of Sparta, who was kidnapped by the Trojan prince Paris. Now, Miss Helen was actually already married, and her husband, his brother, was actually Agamemnon, king of Mysia. And so her husband convinced his brother to launch a 10-year siege on Troy to get Helen back. Now, that's the gist of it, but my favorite Greek mythological tale is actually the beginning of the Trojan War, the Judgment of Paris. I am actually so geeked to talk about this because the Judgment of Paris is my favorite mythological tale and story, mostly because my Aunt Sherry, hi Aunt Sherry, had this huge portrait of Rubens' depiction of the Judgment of Paris in her den, and I would stare at it all the time when I was over at her house. Oh, it's my favorite thing. And as I got older, I started to learn about histories, and I also read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I just kind of understood the painting more, and I loved it even more. But Miss Wendy, what was the Judgment of Paris? Let me tell you. The scene starts at a wedding. The wedding of Peleus and Thetis, to be exact. Everybody is there. I'm talking every single one. Zeus, Hera, Aphrodite, Athena, everyone who's anyone in mythological history is there. Except Eris, the goddess of discord. Because she specifically was not invited to this said wedding. So Miss Eris, being the absolute icon of petty, had a golden apple and threw it into the wedding party. But on that apple, she wrote, "To the fairest" on it. Now, count them, 3 divas saw that apple and said, "Oh, that's obviously mine." That's mine, right? That's mine. And those 3 lovely goddesses were Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. And the ladies were like, if we can't describe, Zeus, you pick, whose apple is this? And Zeus was very smartly like, "Ooh, I cannot choose, no, I love all of you equally, you are all so beautiful in my eyes." Because one was his wife, one was his favorite daughter, and the other one was Aphrodite. He was gonna be in a pickle regardless. So he was like, "Oh, you know what? I'll actually have this mortal do it who just went viral. Yeah. My guy Paris. Yeah, he just had this bull competition that Ares was in, and he was transformed into a bull, and he was actually super fair and said, 'Hey, Ares is the better bull.'" And he didn't know it was Ares. It was so crazy. He was so fair to the gods. So Zeus hit up Paris of Troy. Each of the goddesses were shown to Troy, and each of them actually bribed him. Hera offered to make him king of all Europe and Asia. Athena offered him incredible wisdom and to never ever lose a battle. But then Aphrodite offered him the most beautiful mortal woman of all of the world, Helen of Sparta, the wife of King Menelaus. Paris picked, drumroll please, Aphrodite. He picked the goddess of love and her bribe of having his wife be Helen of Sparta, the most beautiful mortal woman of the world. But in exchange for the wrath of all of the other Greek gods. Like, ooh, diva, they were mad. And not to jump around back to the beginning of this video where I mention the abduction or elopement of Helen of Troy. Yeah, so they just kind of snatched her. They really honestly just kind of snatched her up. They like popped her like, oh, you're Paris now. Oh, cool. All right. And so the Greeks' like expedition to retrieve Helen of Troy is like the entire literary basis of the Trojan War. Now, like I said, they most likely just like snatched her up, but there are some other literary sources where Helen actually willingly goes with Paris because she does feel an attraction to him as well. In some tales, most of them is like, oh, they just snatched her up. Now, because of this, King Menelaus' brother Agamemnon, who is the king of Mycenae, led an expedition of Achaean troops and besieged the city of Troy for 10 straight years. 10 years! 10! Now, to kind of press like fast forward in like 2x speed, a lot of heroes and Greek heroes die in the Trojan War. Also, spoiler alert for a 3,000-year-old story. Some notable Achaeans that die are actually Ajax and Achilles. Also, Achilles is the son of Peleus and Thetis. Yeah, remember that wedding that we went to, like, at the beginning of this video? Yeah, he's the kid to those divas. Another person who dies is Paris. Yeah, the catalytic character dying, I know. Ooh, wild. Now, as that is happening on the mortal plane, the gods are at war as well, honey. Okay, now let's actually look at who was actually on the side of Troy during all of this. Number one being Aphrodite, obviously, because, I mean, Paris granted her as, like, the fairest of all, you know, so she was like, oh, my guy Paris, love him, mwah. She also wanted to protect, like, the Paris and Helen, like, comboing that she did. Next up is actually Ares. If you don't know, Ares notoriously in Greek mythology is Aphrodite's lover. He is purely there to protect his boo thing. And he's like, this is my girl, even though she's married to, yeah, it's a whole thing. They're lovers, so they're, you know, he's gonna protect his girl. The next two actually be the twins, Artemis and Apollo. Apollo mostly because he has a lot of literary, like, referencing and, like, history between him and the peoples of Troy. And then Artemis because Agamemnon once killed one of her sacred deer, and she's real still salty about that, don't blame her. Yeah. Next is the side of the Greeks in which gods and goddesses were on that side. One being Hera, numero uno, Miss Diva. Mostly she's just like upsetty spaghetti about the judgment of Paris. Like, don't blame her, cool. Next is my mother Athena. Still, you know, same mad as Hera, but also super big fan of Odysseus. Like, super mega fan, like stan, like super big fan of Odysseus. So like, she's like, yeah, that's my guy. And the last notable one is actually Poseidon, because Poseidon actually mythologically built the walls of Troy, and he was never paid for it. Okay, I understand, you know, workers' rights. Now, there are two notable gods that remain super gray in this, which is actually Zeus and Hephaestus. Zeus, totally understandable, like he's trying not to get his hands dirty in either situation. And Hephaestus has me a little puzzled because you would think, you know, the husband I mentioned earlier that Aphrodite was married to, even though she's sleeping with Ares. Yeah, that's Hephaestus. Hephaestus is her husband. But in the process of the Trojan War, he did find out she be cheating on him with Ares. So, like, it's a whole thing. Yeah. But Hephaestus made weapons for, like, both sides. So, like, I don't know. It just a very gray area. Another thing to note, while everybody is fighting and the gods are also fighting as well, like, you know, mirroring the battlefield and stuff, my very favorite fact about the Trojan War actually comes from a very obscure book that I read, I think when I was like a teenager. To kind of paraphrase some different literary like sources and references, there was a battle between Athena and Ares, and as quite naturally, Mother was absolutely eating him up, and he was trying to flee, get away from her, but you know, she's Mother, and she's, you know, she's gonna mother. And Miss Aphrodite saw this, he was trying to get away, she went to help him flee the battlefield, and then Athena, full on, square in the face, punches the goddess of beauty right in the middle of her face. It's such a funny thing, and like the parallels and like analogies you could use between what Athena represents and what Aphrodite represents, and Athena punching her square in her face where her beauty is. It's a whole thing. It's one of my favorite facts. It's just funny. Now, if you don't know, the city of Troy actually fell to the ruse of the Trojan horse, which is, the Greeks actually offered it as like a gift of peace and things like that. And like, oh, here is this big, beautiful horse as a gift, yada, yada. And this horse was huge. Like, it was a huge wooden horse on wheels, like huge, huge, huge. But hidden inside that horse was an entire troop of men, like an army of men hiding in that horse. And those men were ready to pounce at any given moment. And unfortunately, the Trojans didn't know that, and they just said, oh my god, this is so great, wheel it on in, yeah, come on in, yeah. Let them right in the city. Like, in the middle of the city, they had a big celebration and party and everything, and everybody got all drunk and, you know, crazy and whatever, and everybody went night-night. And that is when those troops pounced. The troops inside the Trojan horse, you know, slaughtered everybody. Everybody going forever night-night at that point. And because of that, Troy finally fell and they lost the war. Now, I have left out a lot of information because I didn't want to spoil the entire Iliad for you. Because if you are interested in Greco-Roman mythology or anything like that, it is a must-read. You definitely should read it. I read it at like 14 or 15, which maybe isn't like the correct age to be reading the Iliad and the Odyssey. I don't know. And like, I didn't read it for like class. I read it on like my own like free time and will. Like, that was my choice. But I was going through a lot of things as a teenager. My hyper-focus was Greco-Roman history and things. It was a whole moment. But if you are interested in reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, definitely recommend go ahead and do that. And that, my loves, is actually just kind of like the sped-up version of the Trojan War and kind of like the major points. At least to me. At least to me. Everybody's different. At least to me, those were kind of like the main points. Have you ever read about the Trojan War or even read the Iliad and the Odyssey? Sound off in the comments below. Also, sound off in the comments, who would you have picked for the Judgment of Paris? Me, because I'm such a Mama Athena stan, I would have picked her. But I do love Aphrodite and Hera. Mwah. Or whose side would you have been on? Would you have been with the Trojans and the Troy people, or would you have been with like the Greeks and the sea? Like, who would you have been with? And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and stick around because you just might learn something.